the other one that's in the military now, who turns 20 this September.
Brilliant.
Okay, so I have started the recording so that when we are like, all right, we'll go live, we'll play the intro, and I'll just clip it from there. I'll send it to you, Solomon, and then you can upload it.
Oh, that sounds good. Now we'll have to take down the live, right? And then we'll have to do a premiere.
Yeah, we'll just set it up for the same time.
Okay, that sounds good.
It's not like the chat can see each other anyways, and we don't really interact with the chat, so
right.
So it should be just like our normal live stream, except it'll be pre-recorded.
Yeah. So today we were, let's see, this is trial day.
About day 11. Let me get my notes up. I watched it last night or yesterday, and it's a tough one.
It's
like I said, we have opening the door issues. What did I say? I just gave through a whole list of legal issues. We have opening the door, prior bad acts, hearsay, calls for speculation, witness tampering, and there might be more. So those are the legal things that we could talk about. The biggest thing in my mind is the psychological issues underlining all of this with OA's testimony. But there are some legal things to talk about as well, such as how do you question a child in a way that doesn't elicit testimony that you don't want out there, that the parties have agreed isn't coming out there.
Right.
So, for example, Nicole asked about, I can't remember the question, but she then responded with the marijuana, or the marijuana was kind of already out there, but she responded with the gun was the big thing.
Yeah.
The whole gun incident. And that shouldn't have been out there.
Threatened with that gun for your information.
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
So it's just
which we just listened to, the 911 call where he's on the phone with the 911 operator and he says, I don't own a gun. I have no means to protect myself. I felt like these men were armed and they were here to do me harm. And so you have this this very different, testimony between the two of them. And then the evidence doesn't show the gun. So it has to be mentioned. We have to talk about the gun situation. I think that Lou, your specialty is we really, like I said, we want to go into the psychological issues, suggestive memory in children, especially the parental manipulation and alienation.
Yeah.
The psychological fallout, the suggestibility, even of memory with the police interviews. The attention-seeking behavior, kind of like the tug of war between the parents that was ultimately won when Zach was then removed, right? So those things are totally your wheelhouse, and I think that we're gonna want to go into those topics with you for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there is just so much going on with OA's testimony, and of course, it all starts really from the police interview that SB and OA did. And you can see the seeds of everything being sown then probably started before as well. As, you pointed out, there is this, the parental sort of almost competition for OA, which was eventually won by SB when Zach went to prison. But yeah, there's so many different things to talk about. So just whatever you want to prioritize, I'm happy to take a look at.
Okay.
So I'll do my normal little intro, except going through a list of 20 witnesses. I just have 2.
Yeah, I was gonna say we got to start with Morton and sort of the breakdown of that conversation where they said that the Brady violation from the day before, which I think we're going to have to reference to give it context. The lack of evidence that was turned over to the defense. They said that they found it in a file that the state happened to have in the discovery, which is questionable because it wasn't there originally and now it suddenly was, which I think we're going to go into a little bit more in depth. on day on Barely Interesting day
10.
Yeah, day 10.
Well, when we talk about day 10.
Why is this? It's trial day 11, but it's Barely Interesting day 10. So it's recording in the upper left. It says day 11.
I was just wondering.
Day 11, trial day 11. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Episode 10. I'll get it fixed when we.
I was just wondering. I've made a list of issues around OA's demeanour in court, and because there's so many psychological points to look at, if you wanted to sort of focus more on the demeanour issues that OA was displaying in court.
What was interesting is I picked it up during the live stream when I was originally covering this, but after having watched Sadie's police interview and OA in the room for that, it's so much more clear what I can see her face now sitting on that stand. You know, it's just so much more clear what she was doing. Solomon, were you asked to leave your phone? Was that you?
Yes, it was me.
So I thought it was you.
So that's going to need to be brought up because that was my personal interaction with the DA, and the fact that he had no legal grounds for search and seizure, but he told the sheriff to take my phone, which is like way outside the bounds. And David, I would love for
like Nicole said, do you have a warrant?
Yeah, exactly.
And the judge was like, well, you don't represent the family, so I'm not going to allow you to speak on that. Right. And so if I was Solomon, my first response would have been, do you have a warrant?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they just kept talking because she argued for me. Then she continued to argue for me. But I was like standing there and I was about to say, like, on what reasonable suspicion do you have to then seize and search my phone? Because if you're going to take my phone, I'm leaving with my property. Like, I'll just leave. And that was where I was at with the situation. I'll just watch it online. Go fuck yourself. But yeah, so we have to talk about that. We have to talk about the lip pinching and the facial expressions that Zach is making. And Lou, you might be able to kind of break down like maybe your view of his psychological state in that moment. So either way, we have to start going live very soon. Yep. So what else do we have?
Can I just ask a quick question? Did you see OA's face in the police interrogation? Did you pixelate that out?
I pixelated it out, yeah. So I've seen her face.
Right, okay. Because there just so many red flags in her demeanour in court that all point to the parental alienation and parental grooming.
Right, and if you watch the interrogation, what I try to do is just pixelate her face so you could get her body movements. Because she's just like, Mom, I told you, did it, very much in charge of that whole dynamic.
Yeah.
And SB is sitting down in the lower position, pleading almost for rescue from her own daughter and not taking any care or nurturing stance towards what OA might be experiencing. It's really quite shocking.
Yeah, she kind of leans into victimhood instead of parentalhood, right? Or parenthood. Yeah. So it's like oh, I'm having such a bad time and melts down as opposed to taking charge of the situation, which is
and then we see by the time 3 years later, OA is coming to court and she's displaying many of those behaviors herself. So, there's a lot of grooming that was going on after Zach was imprisoned. And yet, of course, we have the projection that OA is saying that Zach groomed her.
Yeah. All right. So.
No, I don't want to do it that way. Sorry, I'm just trying to grab my the more you know. I forgot we had to do this. I wasn't prepared to do this. I'm glad I just ran home. But I have to get the more you know segment over to my computer real quick. So let me just download.
I do have to leave for work at 10:15. So I have to be out the door. So we're cutting it close for me.
I understand. Hang on, give me 1 second. Let me just download this thing.
I mean, when I was reviewing the day 11, and I made copious notes, and I just thought, God, there's enough material here to write a dissertation or, do sort of the 2-hour documentary.
Yeah, I think that there really is, there's the potential for doing like a doctorate level like dissertation, like an actual paper on parental alienation and abuse, and this is like a huge case. It's a very substantial case in presenting that, and I couldn't agree more. And it's awful for us as a family too.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the main things that I experienced, is how painful it was to watch as an outsider. And then looking at you, Solomon, your dad, and Zach's faces, and the pain etched, and how indescribable it must be to have the family split like that.
It's not great.
This is episode 10, right?
Barely Interesting, episode 10.
Yeah, okay. All right. Then let's...
So David gets distracted by the 1,000,010 things that he has to do, and so I try to keep him on track.
Thank you. All right, so let's do this thing. Welcome back to Barely Interesting, where we are talking about day 11 of the Zachariah Anderson trial. And with us today is Lou Hiller. Welcome. How are you today?
Hello, I'm good, thanks. How are you two?
Not too bad. I hear you're from Australia. At least the accent sounds like.
No, I'm from England.
It all sounds the same once you get outside the United States. But welcome. So today we have Sean Morton on the stand, which he continues his testimony from the day prior. But more importantly, we have the testimony of OA. And with that, a whole host of psychological and legal issues that we're here to talk to you about today. But before we get to her, Solomon, we had an issue we were dealing with yesterday's trial. What was that issue, and can you explain that?
So yesterday we had a potential Brady violation. We had the prosecution failing to turn over the complete discovery to the defense with Officer Sean Morton. And so a lot of this morning's discussion was surrounding what happened as court ended yesterday. Nicole left to go with Officer Morton to then look at the digital discovery that he had, the actual physical evidence that he had in the police archive, to then review the file, because she didn't have the evidence that the state presented of the snapshot or the clipped image of that tracker. So with an incomplete discovery handed to the defense, we again have another situation with ambush tactics. So we have more discovery, more information not turned over to the defense, and an inability to present a complete defense because not all the information was out there and available for the defense to review and refute.
Yeah, now it was apparently discovered. I have it down here as the report issue was solved. That was my notes, because that's essentially what was presented first thing in the morning. The report issue was solved. I'm not sure why the defense didn't push harder on that issue, but they didn't. And cross-examination resumed of Officer Morton. There was a lot of testimony regarding SIM cards, resets to factory setting, whether or not a GPS tracker, or not a GPS tracker, but the GPS settings in the phone were on, and a lot of speculation as to why wouldn't it turn on. the GPS locator within their phone. And that is where we get sort of our first real evidentiary issue, is with that regard. Asking someone to speculate why you wouldn't turn on your location tracker. It could be a myriad of things. Like, for example, I just watched a video on YouTube where it talked about all the things, the apps and what they can track. So I started going and turning everything off. And now I've gone too far and my phone won't sync with my car. I don't know. I got to fix it. But still, there's a myriad of reasons why somebody would turn stuff off on their phone, right? So to speculate and say he's doing something nefarious, I think that was improper, but the judge allowed it.
Well, we also have the discussion of Rosalia Gutierrez's phone ended up being, taken to Zach's house. I think there's some reference to that as well. So when we have him, it's a setup for when Rosalia's physical situation or physical GPS location is located up at the up at Zach's home. So it's a little bit of that, which I think we're talking about Monday or Tuesday, something like that.
Yeah. So it does lead into that too. But again, the calling for speculation, that's what the objection is. Like, you don't know, you're guessing, you're speculating. That's improper. But the judge seems to allow it. Just let everything in. And so that's a problem as well. They did talk about the orientation shifting of the phones, timing of that sort of thing. And then when the phone was last, active at some point, indicating that, and then there was a stupid question. Do you know of any conditions that would allow a phone battery to die faster? And he said cold, but also heat. And he didn't say heat. So extremes on both ends. So you're guessing again, right? But again, no objection, and that went through.
It was convenient that he just said cold, as it turns
just
out.
Happened to be found in a freezer.
Yeah, because working construction for as long as I have, my phone has sat out in the sun and had to force shutdown because it got too hot for the processor. So these are safety things that happen. The battery will leach out, a little bit faster when it's extremely cold. But the freezer is probably not extremely cold, and that is open for debate, right? Because what is a freezer normally set at for its temperature? And moreover, what was that freezer's temperature set at, and was it recorded? Because that actually is a statement to the lack of police investigation or the thorough investigation by the police.
So. But that was essentially the end of Officer Morton's testimony. And then we moved on to OA. This is one of the most tragic of testimonies that I have ever seen, because it involves a child having to sit on the stand and stare at both of her parents and testify against one. And Lou, hi, what are the psychological implications of just that act alone?
Well, I mean, where do you start? It's almost, and I was just so surprised it was allowed to happen, but we understand why it was allowed to happen. It's because OA had such critical evidence in order to get the conviction. But in reality, it just seems like child abuse to me, state-sanctioned child abuse, because there's no way that she's going to be able to come out of having testified and effectively incriminated her father without a serious damage, long-term damage. So, yeah, I mean, where do you start with how terrible it was to do that to a child?
Now, the other thing I noticed, too, is there's always been leading throughout this entire case, but there was so much more so leading with this particular witness from District Attorney Gravely. And that leads us into our latest segment of.
And did your what, if anything else, did you hear about about whether the defendant planned on?
I don't object to leading.
Well, I have to get her there somehow, Judge. I'm not. Again, I'm not.
Is not among the permitted methods ordinarily, except in exceptional circumstances. He hadn't finished his question, so I don't know where he's going. So you can finish your question.
What, if anything else, did the defendant say to you about additional?
As we've discussed before, some lawyers have, either by practice or by education, been given the idea that if they put in the words, if anything, it's not a leading question, and that's not universally true. So although I am not prepared yet to denounce your question as leading, why don't you try to rephrase it anyway?
I just love how Gravely is growing with all of you and learning the law one step at a time.
I mean, there's some issues with the leading questions, though. Like, he gives multiple choice answers and consistently has the correct answer as the last one. He's actually mouthing along. You see him do that during the answers to the questions. You know,
especially
he's
with
doing
Mr. Washington.
Yeah, well, yeah, with Marquand, but also today with OA, there's on so many of the witnesses, you can see him just mouthing simultaneously with the witness, and that, I mean, I understand that he's memorized the playbook, and that's a certain level of expectation on what he's reviewed and prepping his witness, but it's improper, and it might be a personal tick, but we don't know that it's not, coaching or anything else.
Now OA is 12 at this time, right?
She's 12.
She's 12 sitting on that stand.
12.
So Lou, my question for
No,
you is
she's 15 or almost 15. She's 14 sitting on the stand. She was 12 at the time of
12 at the time.
arrest.
Okay.
So it was 33 months later. It wasn't quite her birthday. She was almost 15. And there's one other thing that I just wanted to mention, and that was a reference to what you had said earlier about the psychological damage done by the authority. Now, I've looked into the Wisconsin statute for a minor witness testifying, and they could have absolutely done a video testimony with questions asked outside of the courtroom to make it less traumatic for the child, but they intentionally chose not to do that because they wanted to rile her up. And I know that Zach's lawyers tried to deny the testimony because of the psychological and emotional damage that could be done to her. Like, they actually requested that she didn't testify in the court, and it was denied by the judge. So we have a situation where not only was the defense trying to protect her by removing her from that situation, but they also didn't come up with another solution or a better solution to protect the daughter, and that is fundamentally a problem with the responsibility and ethics of this courtroom.
I mean, one of the big problems is that we see OA is being used, I would suggest, by both SB and the prosecution to almost be like the fall guy or the patsy, because, she can then be blamed for the testimony that she's given against her father, so that SB doesn't have to take that responsibility all by herself. So that's where a lot of the grooming that was so evident starting in the police interview, that's obviously, I would suggest, probably carried on for the 3 years leading up to the trial.
Yeah, that was what I was when I watched the police interview, the most striking thing to me was the way that she seemed to be in control, because Sadie specifically gave her that control in that police interview. Well, you go say whatever you're comfortable with, and you do this, and, oh, I didn't know that. Why are you telling me this now? And put a lot of the blame and the onus on her in that police interview. And when I was watching the trial live, I didn't have that context, but I felt something was off. But you see it even more with the police interview, in your mind when you're watching this again. Even though you can't see her, you can hear it in her voice.
Yeah.
There was a point when, apparently, according to Sadie's testimony, when she was examined regarding the sign language, where it was indicated that that this child was looking at both of her parents, and she was getting a little lippy, and both of her parents responded in the courtroom as a parent would. And I just wanted to know, I guess your job as a parent doesn't end right at the courtroom. And so did you did you observe anything, any sort of mannerisms from OA that would seem to indicate that she was being coached from the audience or from the defense table?
I mean, she's came across to me, obviously not being able to see her face. She came across to me as somebody who's very overconfident, and I would imagine that that's arisen over the 3 years of both her mother and the prosecution having to pander to her because her evidence was so important in order to get the conviction. I mean, I am making some assumptions that the evidence given has not been entirely truthful. And there's a lot that we can look at in her demeanour in court that would indicate that she was not being entirely truthful. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I see a serial manipulator, and one example in particular, when she talks about seeing her dad placing the phone by the air conditioner to record, and then when challenged with the idea that from her position she wouldn't actually be able to see that, she then comes up with an excuse of, well, I saw him walk around the corner, and then he came back, and then later on at some point I watched a video. So I'm assuming, although she was very confident in her initial statement, that she saw him place the camera. And so it's things like that that throw me off, thinking this is a child who manipulates others.
Yeah, I mean, on that point particularly, when she was being questioned, she indicated the phone was grabbed. So that's not, she's not saying again, as she said with the gun, she's not saying my dad grabbed the phone, my dad threatened me with the gun. She's using this passive language, and that is an indication that she's not talking from her memory, but likely at least fabricating some of it.
That's interesting you mentioned that, because she does say, I was threatened with the gun, or with a gun even. I don't even know if it was a definite article. And that's interesting that you picked up on that. But yeah, you're right. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's always, there's no actor in her stories generally, when it doesn't seem like an actor would line up with her testimony, right?
Yeah.
So one of the other problems with putting a child on the stand is their tendency to perhaps exaggerate or go off script. And what I mean by go off script, remember, these are song and dance productions. Trials are. We know the attorneys have worked out with the judge generally, outside of this case, what's going to be presented. And everyone's on the same page that this gun thing is not going to be talked about, except apparently OA, who just blurted it out. So now we have an issue of, did the defense, by asking a fairly vague, innocuous question, but yet eliciting that answer, did they open the door to all kinds of things? Now, the state said, we're not going down that road. Fair enough on the state. It's the only fair thing that I've seen thus far. But did the real question there, and the real danger there is, do you open the door to these things? Hence another reason why you might want to do a pre-recorded sort of deposition style of a child's testimony, even at the age of 14.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the UK, definitely, a child is screened or they are presented via video, so they don't get any feedback and then not exposed to what's going on in court. So to put OA on the stand in the line of sight of both her mother and her father, I mean, that was just asking for trouble. And she's clearly somebody who's not, she's developed a very, very strong sense of herself in some ways. Like I said, potentially really overconfident. Sorry, Solomon, were you going to say something?
I mean, it's just, this is the first time that she had seen Zach in almost 3 years. So in 33 months, since literally the weekend that Rosalia went missing, is the first time that she's seen her father, who she loves very much. In almost 3 years. It was the first time she was able to talk to him, the first time she was able to see him. She had been completely isolated from him for almost 3 years. And in those 3 years, for everyone out there that is struggling to really comprehend this, there was at least 3 interviews with police where they're presenting evidence to her, showing her evidence, and then asking her to identify, pieces. That leads to incorrect memory formation, because then she starts to conflate the discussion with the police officer with actual memory. Then we have also, the issue between them in the court where then both parents are trying to parent her because her mood is escalating. She's spiraling out of control. She's trying to talk to Zach because she hasn't seen him in 3 years. So she's trying desperately to speak with her father, her beloved father, who she hasn't seen in so long, every second that she can. And there's one scene that I saw from the court today where you can see, Zach sitting there and he's just so full of love in his face for his daughter, but she's trying to talk to him, and you can see his face kind of screw up a little bit in his eyes, and then he kind of like subtly just tries to shake his head like, no. Right?
Almost like that's not his daughter anymore. Is kind of the feeling I was getting.
He's trying to like shut it down, like stop this.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And then later on, there was testimony that didn't make sense to what had actually transpired, and you can kind of see his eyes screw up, like his emotional state. He's it's all on his face, where he's like, "What are you talking about? What? This is completely fabricated. This is imaginary. This doesn't make any sense." And I'm not saying that Zach's memory is perfect by any means, but we have, as you said, suggested memories, things that she's saying that she believes to be 100% true, completely false, objectively false. And I'm not trying to shame my niece, and I want to be very careful. This is someone that I love very much, and I want her to also understand that that's not the objective of talking about this, but objectively false information. And there's some of it that's absolutely not her fault in this, but she believes it to be true.
So just on that point, I was thinking about, what's the psychological mechanism going on, and possibly something to think about is something called a folie à deux, and it's like a shared delusion. It's a non-pathological form of folie à deux that SB became very paranoid and developed some quite delusional beliefs about Zach. Now, whether I got the impression from the police interview that SB was fully into this self-absorption and believing every negative thought she had about Zach. And you could see how OA was getting drawn into that. And that after Zach was off the scene and OA no longer had the balance of mum on the one hand and dad on the other hand, that she got sucked fully into developing this paranoid delusion about who Zach was. So I don't know whether SB believed any of it genuinely or whether she was just a fantastic actress.
Well, that's one of the things too I noticed with today's testimony is that so you're presented with this position. Even the earlier witness, the officer, I forget his name, Morton. He had testified regarding the issue of being able to track somebody's phone, right? And so there's this paranoid idea that Zach can track Sadie's phone. This officer is questioned about it, saying, "Well, I guess it's possible," even though he really doesn't know. And then so this notion is placed in there in front of the jury without any evidence to support the fact that Zach actually did it, right? There's no evidence that he actually did this. So now the onus is on the defense. I'm not sure why the state is allowed to present evidence that they don't have any support for, other than an opinion of a couple of people that really don't know what they're talking about. And so now Zach is on heel saying, well, I have to somehow prove that I'm incapable of tracking the phone. Now, the defense did some of that by talking about the GPS trackers and things with this witness, and then we have attacks on other witnesses as well. But we have the daughter adopting mother's idea that Zach can just do this and has done this without any shred of evidence. I remember the police interview. OA went in there and said, "Oh yeah, he's tracking he tracks my mom's phone all the time," and there's no evidence of this whatsoever. But they just sort of formed this "two people have said it must be true" sort of approach.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we have that. I mean, we keep referencing, the police interview, but in Zach's police interview, they ask him about his knowledge, right, about being able to track phones. And he said, "I worked for the phone company at the fiber optic head between Japan and the United States. I didn't do anything with any of that technology. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know how to do that." And so his words, which is true, that's verifiable, he did do that. So I mean, for the issues, the complications that kind of feed into this, like a delusional belief held by Sadie that is then polluted into the daughter,
and the police the police as well.
Right.
That it becomes like a folie à deux, a folie à trois, and then you just continue counting the people that get sucked into Sadie's very powerful. And I have to say, I do actually think for some reason, and it's possibly due to some narcissism on Sadie's behalf, that she actually believed that Zach was so obsessed with her that he would risk the rest of his life to harm them.
Realistically,
I can get behind that.
What do you think? I mean, we just had Sadie the last couple of days, but what do you think about the idea that she wanted him so desperately to want her that badly that she convinced herself that had to be the truth? That she wanted him to want her so badly that he would fight for her like that she convinced herself that it must be the truth.
Yeah, and I've actually made a note that I think she was obsessed, because at the beginning of the police interview, for example, when Anshut said, "Okay, where should we start?" and Sadie said she wasn't sure, and so Anshut said, "Well, how long have you known him?" And she immediately started talking about Zach, and it was RG that was missing. So there's just all these signs that she has quite a lot of, there was obviously a dysfunctional relationship between Sadie and Zach. And I don't think she was getting what she wanted.
Now we have another issue leading towards not pre-testimony witness tampering, but during testimony witness tampering. We alluded to it a little bit earlier when we're talking about OA looking at both Zach and Sadie. There was a whole side issue regarding Sadie, perhaps sign language. I don't know sign language, but communicating with OA, which involved our boy here, Solomon, to some extent. So, can you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I didn't witness Sadie signing directly to OA on the stand. That is not what I asserted to the court. That's not what I asserted to Zach's defense team either. What I did see her do was sign to the person behind her while talking, and I brought that up, that she talks because she is fluent or she had a minor in deaf studies in American Sign. That signing is within sight of the witness, and technically some simple sign language was taught to the minor witness, and I had no idea what other potential signing could have been taught. Furthermore, what was reported was the other family members, Sadie's stepmother and stepbrother, mouthing to the witness and signing "calm down." So it was the other witnesses. It wasn't Sadie overtly trying to calm her. It was the other people in the gallery that were above the level of the bar signing, calm down, calm down. So there was communication from the gallery to the witness, which was completely improper, something that we had been told not to do and had been warned by the judge that he would throw us out if we did. So there was communication in that on the on the prosecution's side of the gallery. Meanwhile, we had the lip pinching, which was not actually shown on camera today, but it was then shown on like whatever, Law and Crime or whatever it was.
Yeah, it made its round to the networks. The lip pinching. Explain what the lip pinching was, if for those who didn't see it in the trial.
So I was in the courtroom watching, as I had referenced, watching the interaction between my niece and my brother, and she continued to try and talk to him, to mouth to him, and it was like, it was overtly like trying to, like mouth words to him in between answering questions with the prosecutor. So there was this exchange where she's desperately trying to speak with her father, and in that he's trying to tell her to stop doing this. Like, this is not the appropriate time. Please stop. And that was one of those moments that I had just mentioned earlier. The like he does this subtle like not now head shake, and that she doesn't pick up on. She's not paying attention. And at some point he is telling her, please stop doing this. Stop trying to talk to me right now. It's not the time. And that exchange is then spun into a totally different narrative by Law and Crime, intentionally, because they could dramatize it and make it something that was clickbait worthy, into him trying to intimidate or suppress. But you also don't see him like angry or anything like that. The look on his face when he's doing it is just, please stop. And so the judge made the ruling today that both parents were signing in some way, both sets of family, and so he just ignored the issue, and he said, if it happens again, I'll deal with it, but knock it off.
And then Solomon got yelled at by the judge.
I did, yeah. So part of that was that I was going to have to take the stand because the prosecutor denied that Sadie was indeed familiar with American Sign, because they were arguing whether she was fluent or was a translator in it.
Was she was certified or not?
Certified, yeah.
That was the word.
It was this argue of semantics on the certification aspect, but she had a minor in deaf studies. It's reasonable to assert that she's fluent in ASL, and that it was part of her capacity to be able to communicate completely in sign. She made the argument that sign language is spoken here properly, which only actually goes to her expertise in the language. But outside of that, this is like an argument.
Well, I don't need to hold it here. I can hold it up here, and it still means the same thing, right?
But not properly. So if you're
not properly
speaking sign, it's right in here, right? Your hands are supposed to be here, because thank you and everything. It's
all the hands behind us are in the wrong spot then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we try to evade the testimony. So my father and I were then asked to step out of the courtroom, but there was also the brazen accusation by the prosecutor that we were texting with the defense and feeding them some sort of information. And Gravely got really upset about that, because he was losing a moment that he considered a victory in the courtroom, because he felt like we were feeding information to the defense. And so he flipped out. He demanded that I turn my phone over. And there was a very uncomfortable moment, where he tells the sheriff to take my cell phone from me with no crime committed for an illegal seizure of my device. And then I refused to hand it to the sheriff. I gave it to Jen instead. And he apologized for that the following Monday, or the following time I saw him.
Who apologized?
Gravely.
Oh.
He walked up to me in the hallway outside of the courtroom, and he shook my hand and apologized to me. But it was the greasiest apology.
He shook your hand like this.
It was
with his tiny fingers,
his
tiny
very,
hands.
very soft hands. Yes, but it was like the least sincere apology. He was like, heat of the moment. I just got carried away. I was driving home from court, and I was just like, did I just try and take that guy's phone? Ha ha ha. And I just, it was just disingenuous. He knew what he did, and he knew what he did was wrong, and that was his way of trying to smooth it over.
With just very quickly with the sign language thing, that it seemed to me that there was quite a lot of symbolism in that moment where you had OA in between as separate parents, both trying to communicate something different to her, or both trying to be something in OA's life, competing almost for her attention. And that is something I was going to ask Solomon. Is that something that you noticed in the lead up to all this stuff with RG, the competition between Zach and Sadie for OA's sort of attention, affection?
There were some issues leading up that were a little more pressing, and I can't go into those exact details, but there was a jockeying for approval or attention. Zach was displeased with some actions that she had taken, and so she was, she had taken my sister's old cell phone to try and get access to like Snapchat and like things like that, and had been doing some things that were not appropriate, and so with that came Zach and Sadie actually working together very closely leading up to that, but also communicating a little bit more, where the previous couple of months they had been not communicating as much. They had been talking about placement, care for the kids. Zach was trying.
Well, let me interject. They just both filed competing motions, though, or competing petitions for custody with the little ones.
As we heard on Friday, a week ago, when we played the 911 call, Zach says, when he's on hold, he said, "Oh, she filed on the 13th. I filed on the 8th for custody." And in that, we have the setup for this. We have that on the record. We had that in the discovery, which again speaks to the disingenuous nature of the prosecution. They knew that there was a contentious legal battle coming up very soon between the two parents, and they used that as leverage to try and win their case. And this was part of that. For a child of that age to be caught between two parents that are about to go to family court, to then argue for custody of the kids, and there's a lot of finger pointing between the two of them, and there's a lot of issues between the two of them. Of course, she was in the middle of that. There was no question. Every child that goes through that feels like they're caught between the two people that they love the most, and then gets caught between this duplicitous allegiance and trying to figure out how to make this work, or how to get each one of their affection.
Did you ever find out whether the detectives did any research to look at to back up any of Sadie's claims? Because in the police interview, she was saying that she'd signed for custody, that she got a temporary restraining order, etc. And did they ever do any research to check whether Zach had applied for custody, and to check what is this a family issue? It should have really have been dealt with in family court, surely.
From what I've seen in the discovery, the police only tried to investigate items that could potentially lead to his guilt. So anything that could be exonerating, they really attempted to not even turn over the rock. So with that, the false testimony, or the falsification of the police report given by Sadie when she's incorrectly, intentionally manipulating the police, they didn't care. They didn't care about any of the legal issues that they uncovered with Sadie. They didn't care about the video evidence of child abuse by Sadie, the phone recorded child abuse that Sadie was committing to the children. So she's abusing the children. There's evidence of that in the discovery, and the police refused to end it. They absolutely, completely refused to pursue that legal course of action. I think for a couple of reasons. One being because if they did, then they would undermine the one witness that they had that could then try and get them a guilty verdict on Zach. And secondly, because what were they going to do? Even though they're mandatory reporters, they're trying to hang this guy for murder. So they're trying to pick the lesser of evils, I guess. But it still wasn't.
I mean, just talking about the lack of parental boundaries was so heavily displayed in that police interview, where OA is adopting the parental role of trying to normalize things for Sadie, of trying to calm her emotions down. And no matter, at one point, OA says, "I'm hungry." And she's obviously just trying to lighten the situation. And Sadie's response is, "I'm scared," just constantly ratcheting things up, to suck everybody into this folie à deux situation, this paranoid delusions that she had about Zach.
Well, we could go on and on and on and talk about that. I have so many questions for Lou. Unfortunately, we have a 45-minute timeline set by Solomon, so you could blame him. Remember, we stream these in the evenings, Monday through Friday. So for the weekend, we will not be streaming. We'll be right back here again, 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central Time on Monday. Thank you very much, Lou, for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been great. I need to have you on because I have so many more questions for you.
Yeah, I mean, situation. I could literally go on for hours and bore everybody completely to death. I mean, so yeah, I'm very happy to talk in more detail. And it is a subject. I know I'm a bit limited for time today, but it's something. It's so important, and I think we need to perhaps dedicate a good hour, maybe even an hour and a half, to talking about some of these issues in a bit more detail. But I'm happy to do whatever you like.
Right, we could probably do an actual documentary about parental alienation and abuse, domestic abuse of children and partners through parental alienation.
Yeah,
we could do a whole documentary. Like,
we should do that. We should do that.
All right, it's a date.
Yeah.
So another time.
Lovely.
All right. So
thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Monday's trial day is trial day 12. In trial day 12, who was our cast of characters? We have trial day. Oh, Correa. We have Correa taking the stand. So we have Vincent Correa taking the stand for the state, giving the meat and bones. The lead detective takes the stand, where we're going to learn some interesting things about the shortcomings of the police investigation and how quickly
then we start.
They focused on Zach. Go ahead.
Yes. No, and then we start the defense's case in chief. So that
Tuesday.
Yeah, that's Monday. Isn't it?
Day 13 is defense's case in chief. Correa comes back.
I missed a date. Okay. I apologize then. I got all excited for no reason. All right. Thank you all again.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Bye-bye.
Take care.